Hardest player I've had to guard. The hardest player I ever had to guard was...
Hardest player to guard,
Hardest player I've ever had to guard? That's a tough question.
The hardest player that I ever had to guard was Paul Pierce. He was at the end of his career. He was real slow. I didn't think nothing of it, but he was so smart. He was just losing me all over the place. He was playing chess while I was playing checkers.
The hardest player I ever had to guard was probably Derrick Rose, 7-game series. We went all the way to the wire, 7 games, and he put on a show. It was tough. He's very quick, very elusive, and very explosive.
Hardest player for me to guard would be Carmelo.
Melo was one of the toughest because, you know, he knows how to throw his body around. He knows how to play physical.
He's strong, quick, and you know, he can score from anywhere on the floor.
The hardest player that I ever had to guard is Dirk Nowitzki.
Dirk Nowitzki.
Dirk.
Nowitzki the drive, puts up, shot, it's good, and a foul!
Such a skilled player. He can put the ball on the floor, he can shoot it, post up.
You have that height advantage, you know, 7'1", and it's hard to guard him.
His shot and his release is so high that you can't really do much to affect him. It's just whether he misses it or makes it.
Usually, the great players on other teams, I'll let somebody else guard. So that was a good strategy that worked for me.
Toughest player I ever had to guard would be Tim Duncan. Timmy D for sure.
Timmy for the win. Got it! Tim Duncan!
He's Mr. Fundamental, but you know, he was just so solid. He was so smart, reading the defense, reading what they would give him, and just taking it.
Hardest player I've ever had to guard, I would say Tony Parker.
Prime Manu Ginobili.
Manu Ginobili, when he was in his prime.
His herky-jerky style, the fact that he was left-handed, it just made him tough to guard.
The hardest player I've ever had to guard is Anthony Davis.
Anthony Davis.
You can't really take anything away from him.
He's a big with so many skills, and you know, he's one of the best that's doing it.
Probably, I say James Harden.
James Harden, just because he's so shifty. The minute you stop him, you got to counter him.
You can feel like you're playing the best defense ever. He'll still make a tough shot in your face.
The hardest player I ever had to guard is probably LaMarcus Aldridge.
I had some really good battles with LaMarcus Aldridge.
Last year, I think LaMarcus Aldridge really outplayed me. A great post-up player, great offensive player, and you know, he's a tough matchup.
The hardest player I've ever had to guard was Brandon Roy.
Early in my career, definitely Brandon Roy. Blast from the past, Brandon Roy, he was tough.
Complete player, can shoot threes, can drive to the basket. He was strong, quick. Fortunately, he retired due to injury.
The hardest player that I've had to guard would be Steve Nash.
Steve Nash. I was an 18-year-old kid thrown into a game against the would-become MVP, and he just had his way with me.
Hardest player ever had to guard. When I started, it was Iverson.
Iverson behind his back, yes!
His crossover was insane.
He was one of the most complete players. He was so fast, so good with the ball.
He was just amazing, and you know, he was probably one of the hardest guards I've ever had to guard.
Nowadays, Curry just never stays still, you know, always moving, always trying to shoot.
Steph Curry before KD got there, and Russell Westbrook after KD left, because I think their usage rates were so high, and they're such talented basketball players.
Russell Westbrook, he's all gas, no brakes. He's going 100 miles per hour at all times. He's one hell of a player, so he's probably the toughest guy that I have to guard in the league.
Steph Curry or Kyrie Irving?
Definitely Kyrie Irving, because he can do so many things on the offensive end.
The hardest player I've had to guard is definitely LeBron.
LeBron James is it's hard to guard him. You know why? Because he's the best player in the league. He knows the game, he's really smart. It almost feels like he's always a step ahead of you.
What he does on the floor is just not even in this world compared to guys in this league right now.
The hardest person I ever had to guard, Dwayne Wade.
Oh, Wade, what a play!
I always say Kobe Bryant.
Kobe Bryant.
Kobe Bryant.
Kobe Bryant.
Long run out by Kobe Bryant. Behind. Oh! What did I just see?
The way he knew what the defender was going to do, he knew how they would react to his various moves, and his ability not to care what shot he took. It was always tough to guard.
arguably the best player of at least my generation.
He's so gifted and talented, and then he's an assassin. He looks to score every play.
Hardest person I've had to guard was Shaq.
Hardest player I have ever got without thinking is Shaq.
Shaquille O'Neal.
Shaquille O'Neal, because he's beast.
He was so big and strong.
In his prime, he was the hardest player to guard, period.
He was the most dominant center in the world back then.
Luckily, I didn't have to guard him very much, but the very few times that I did, it was painful.
He had me about 200 pounds, and I had not a chance in life of stopping him. The hardest player I ever had to guard was probably Kevin Durant.
Kevin Durant.
Kevin Durant.
I'd say Kevin Durant.
Probably Kevin Durant.
Definitely Kevin Durant.
Just because of his length.
Just because of his length.
He has longer arms than me, and when I feel like I'm contesting this shot, I'm really not.
Durant will rise for three.
Basically a 7-footer with point guard skills.
At least score from all three levels. Pull up, mid-range, three ball. He has everything.
He can kind of do a bit of everything.
Can do basically everything. There's nothing you can really take away. If he has a hot day, you know, he's gonna make his shots.
For me,